Hello, my name is Audrey Simmons and I'm a member of Association of Black Humanists. Today's guest is Tavian Oladapo, who works in microbiology at Imperial College in London. And he is a former singer, songwriter, and he's also passionate about curing his ignorance.
Hi.
And thank you for joining us on our show today.
You're welcome.
I suppose I should really start with asking you the question, how did your journey begin? How did you become a non-believer?
Oh, wow. I was 15 when my dad bought me a book about the Crusades. It was about a Spanish knight called El Cid. It was a fantastic book, actually. I really enjoyed it. But what really disturbed me was the idea that Muslims and Christians were all killing each other and they all believed in the same God really kind of bothered me. And I thought, I think human beings have really got the message of God wrong. They've misunderstood it and they're bad, they're wicked. I'm going to go and read the Bible in order to get the true message of this God. And so I spent 9 months reading the Bible, and I'll never forget this because
From the beginning to...
Oh yes. I read the whole thing, skipped some bits. At the end of 9 months, I was so confused, and I thought, this doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I left it for a month, and then I went back again. Because you have to understand, I was a Christian at the time. This was my life. This was something that I truly believed in. But what I found in the book didn't really I couldn't reconcile it with the idea of a benevolent God. So anyway, I decided to read it again. And I did read it again. And after 2 years, I concluded then that even if there was a God, this cannot be the writings or the dictates of a benevolent God. And that was pretty much the starting point, really. With most people, science is their reason for discarding religion. That didn't happen for me. Religion actually was the reason why I discarded religion.
You discarded religion because of religion?
Yes, because of the claims of religion.
Today's topic is about religion versus science. Mm-hmm. And you, in your background in working in Imperial College and all of those kinds of things, what I want to know is, what I'd like to know is religion compatible with science?
I don't think so, because they're completely different methodologies. Science, for example, is tentative in all its conclusions. There are no absolute truths in science because new evidence can change our position. Mm-hmm. Religion simply says, this is true, and you must believe it, or we're going to hurt you. I don't see how the different methods are quite compatible. Science will change its mind in the face of new evidence. We all know that religion is quite loath to do this. I don't think it's compatible. There are a variety of reasons why I don't agree that it's compatible with scientific inquiry, but we can elaborate on that.
Well, let's go with that. You're saying that religion and science are incompatible. And there are people out there watching this who would say, that's not true. Science and religion, they work hand in hand. We are informed. We've taken religious readings, and what we've found in the Bible is backed up by science.
Well, I would disagree. I mean, I'm no expert, but here's the way I look at it. Religion was our first attempt at scientific inquiry. Religion was our first attempt, in my opinion, to try and understand the natural world and how things work. So, clearly, because we were a young species, we were fearful, we didn't understand lightning, we didn't understand earthquakes, we didn't understand tornadoes or tsunamis, so we made it up. Volcanic eruptions, the gods are angry. And the interesting thing is, it's not just the Abrahamic God, it's whatever God you believe in is angry. A child dies when you don't expect the child, the gods are angry. It's not always the Abrahamic God, it also happens to be the God that you believe in. Now, we now understand why volcanoes erupt. Mm-hmm. You cannot now go back and say, well, actually, it's because the gods are angry. Because the problem is, you first have to say, which God? Which God is angry? And then you have to try and understand why he's angry. And if this God that you claim is angry is then happy to watch tens of thousands of people die because he's angry, where is the benevolence that you claim?
So, But we also have scientists themselves who also claim to be religious.
Yes.
Is that compatible?
Well, here's the way I look at it. There's nothing wrong with a scientist being religious. I have friends who are scientists who are also religious. But as long as you leave your religion at the door, if you work in a lab, before you go in to do your work, you leave your religion at the door because it doesn't actually help, it only gets in the way. I find it quite amusing that you now, the way most religious scientists accept science, to me is actually quite amusing. I'll use biological evolution as a perfect example. It used to be, no, it's not true, you're telling lies, it's the work of the devil, and the usual, you're used to it. Now we have evolutionary creationism.
Evolutionary creationism.
Yeah.
For those of us who don't know anything about that, can you please explain?
Well, they have two names: theistic evolutionists and evolutionary creationists. It's essentially saying, okay, you know what? Okay, evolution is true, but our God did it.
God did it.
No, our God.
Our God.
No,
okay.
no. Because you have to understand, the Christians are saying the same thing. Muslims are making the same claim. That, oh yeah, the Muslim is, the Islam is scientific. The Judaic tradition, so I don't know how far they're into that kind of thing, that, oh, Yahweh did it. But the question you have to ask yourself is, what if a Zoroastrian comes along and says, yes, evolution is true, and Ahura Mazda did it? Where does that actually leave us in trying to find the truth? It's like having a scenario where you say, Batman did it, Thor did it, Spider-Man did it. It's confusing, right?
It sounds very confusing to me. So we have this, but we have science, we have religion. Are they not? Is there no common ground that we can say that religion, and there's a kind of grey area where somewhere we can meet along the way?
Maybe some religions, because some religions don't actually make the kind of absolute claims that maybe the Abrahamic ones do. I don't know a great deal about other religions, but I know that, say, Zoroastrianism, for example, I'm not sure whether they have the idea of believe our story or we hurt you.
Okay.
They don't have that. And then you have other religions that can quite happily just mosey along. They hold their religious belief, but it's almost at a distance. They believe in whatever God they believe in, but it doesn't really impact their life, and they do their science. I know at least one or two. One is a Zoroastrian. He's now moved back to Iran, and he says it all the time. My religion doesn't stop me doing science. So, to that end, you could say yes, they can live together in an easy arrangement, if you like. But the problem is the moment you say that, for example, modern humans are descended from Adam and Eve. Well, I'm sorry, straight away, that's incompatible with what the scientific evidence says. That we're descended from two people in the Middle East who happened to have a conversation with a snake. Sorry. I'm sorry I have to be a bit flippant. This is just my approach to it.
But we could say that we have, but that would just suggest that we have a common ancestor, if all of us come from Adam and Eve.
Well, no, because the thing is, the kind of common ancestry that religion is talking about is essentially saying to you, you are descended from two people. And now what we know, because Christians also claim that DNA doesn't provide new information. So, for an example, if you're descended from two parents, you would only have two versions of a gene in the entire human population. Because you have to remember, they claim that mutation doesn't give us new evidence. Well, we actually already know about millions of different versions of genes. See, there are things called alleles. So they are genes, but they are versions of genes. This is how you trace relationships.
Okay.
For example, because the thing is, every time you have a new child, they tend to have new mutations, and this goes on and on and on. So when you tally up the various versions of just one gene in the human population, we didn't descend from two people. And what's more interesting is we now know that not only are there more versions of genes amongst Africans, we now know that the oldest genes are found amongst Africans. You could argue that Adam and Eve were Africans, maybe they were from Nigeria. I mean, who knows?
We're all from Nigeria.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people can probably claim that. That is just one example. You can look at, say, volcanism. So the idea that God created the earth in 6 days and then he rested. Okay, so think about this for a moment. We all know the damage that volcanic eruptions do, right? So it would be logical to assume that if 80% of the land that we stand on, so 80% of oceanic and continental crust is volcanic in origin, which means it's made of basalt and granite. So what we now know through the geological record is there was a time when volcanoes were just spewing out lava continuously. So to me, and I'm no expert, I'm thinking during that period, there weren't no humans roaming around trying to find a snake to talk to. Because the earth would just be hellish. The evidence is underneath our feet. So how do you reconcile what we know about volcanic rock on earth with the idea that someone spoke it all? We know, for example, that no one spoke land into existence. Volcanoes make land. That's a geological fact. How do you reconcile that with the claims in... there's so much more. I mean, there's just so much more. I don't think so. I think some people try because religion is it's an emotional crutch. And I get it. Yeah, I get it. It's a horrendous world that we live in. It's painful. It's unfair. 430,000 children die of malaria every year. And most of these are African kids under the age of 5.
It's a huge number.
The interesting thing is, the malaria parasite actually has to live inside a mosquito and a human. We are secondary hosts. In order for these mosquitoes to reproduce, they have to do it inside of us. Now, unless you want to say God is a prankster, who concocted that? And would you say that's a kind, benevolent father? I mean, they'll argue and say it's because of original sin. Would you believe that as a mother of children?
Well, parents, no. I can't imagine a parent doing human parent doing that to their child.
No.
But what's usually said is that God is beyond all that. God, we cannot look at God in the same way that we look at ourselves.
Oh, please, I'm sorry. It's a cop-out, isn't it? Because the thing is, clearly, most people are actually better than the religion that they subscribe to. And this is why they contort themselves into the shape of pretzels to try and explain it away. No parent would say, for example, children, don't eat that cake in the fridge or something bad is going to happen to you. He goes out, a dog. And I'm just using this as an example. The dog comes in and says, oh, just eat the cake. Nothing's going to happen to you. Then you come back and you realize that the dog has fooled the kids. Now it's the dog. And the dog is actually your next door neighbor pretending to be a dog. This is if we go with the analogy in the Bible. Because it's Satan, right? So you come back and you think, dog, what did you do? You chop off his legs, right? Because this is what happened in the Bible. You chop off his leg, but it's not actually the dog. It's the next door neighbor. And then you look at your kids and you say, because you ate that cake, I'm going to give your children cancer. I'm going to give the other ones schistosomiasis. I can never pronounce it. I'm going to give the other lot malaria because you lot ate the cake in the fridge. I'm sorry, how is that remotely reconcilable with what we understand about disease in the world? And how is it even moral? I've probably digressed a little bit now because I get a bit carried away.
We're talking about science, and I think I've heard arguments that the only reason we have science is because of God has given those gifts, given certain people knowledge so that we can develop medicine and we can cure those diseases. Isn't that not God who was doing those things?
It's interesting you say that. I remember having a conversation with someone years ago, and she said it was God that gave us the knowledge to discover antibiotics. So I said, who's your God? Homer Simpson. Because, and I'll explain to you why. We now know that microorganisms have been using antibiotics against each other for eons, because it's an arms race. You know, they're fighting against each other. So not only did God give it to them first, right, and they didn't have to pray for it, but we finally discovered it because God wanted us to have it. So we discovered antibiotics. God then said, this is not interesting enough. I'm also going to give microorganisms the mechanism to outwit the antibiotics that I gave my kids. Because they finally found it. But guess what? I'm going to give microbes a means to outwit my children. And not only am I going to do that, these microorganisms, if their friend comes along and he can't, he doesn't have these genes, they can share it with each other like candy. There's a mechanism amongst microbes called a horizontal gene transfer. They give it to each other. Yeah, you don't have. Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, do you honestly, where do you then draw the line between what God is doing? Because clearly, a God that gave you a cure, that then gave the organisms you're trying to fight against, then gave them a way to get around your cure. I mean, what? Has he got a twisted sense of humor or something?
Okay, thank you for that. I think
That's
I'm
okay.
going to draw it to a close. I think you've managed to kind of, I'm convinced anyway, that
Well,
religion, science, they're two different things.
Yes,
And they
yes.
cannot be brought together because they are aimed at two different groups of people, aimed at different parts of ourselves.
I have to add that I understand why we needed religion at the time when our species, we were kind of like babies in a diaper. So we were trying to understand things. It's the reason why different cultures have different religions. They cannot all be true, can they? But I understand it. I get that in the infancy of our species, we had to find ways to make sense. We had to have a structure for laws and so on and so on. But the thing is, we're teenagers now, if you like, for lack of a better word. So science is a way where we're actually using a methodology that actually works. So we're sitting here because it works. Yeah, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But if you can find anything that we discovered that had, say for example, a scientific explanation, and we've now discarded that scientific explanation and given it a religious one, name one. Because it's always the other way around, isn't it?
It is. I think I can safely say that religion hasn't managed to create the same kind of
Well,
cures and taken us to this point. We've got religion at the moment, and it's part of our society, but I don't think it's part of the scientific world in the way that it has,
not really.
as it once was in terms of how we thought and how it influenced
well,
us.
it doesn't help us understand why bacteria have CRISPR. It doesn't help us understand why, because we know bacteria have CRISPR, which is the enzyme with which they cut out DNA of viruses that are trying to infect them. It doesn't help us understand why we can then presuppose that bacteria have CRISPR. Viruses must also have their own mechanism with which they outwit bacteria's attempts to outwit CRISPR. But we now know that phages, which are viruses that infect bacteria, also have their own armory. So unless God is sitting up there having a proper chuckle at our attempts to defend ourselves, biological evolution, for example, is the reason why we understand disease. Not because two people listened to a talking snake and then God got angry and decided to punish everyone. And how horrendous is that, really, as an idea?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that. I think we
You
need. I think really what I wanted to kind of bring out in you is religion and science compatible, and I think we've come to the conclusion that it isn't.
Well, it's not a conclusion. I mean, I hate to say, sorry to jump in there. It's an opinion, because some people may argue, I don't buy it. I don't buy, in particular, the Abrahamic religion. I don't buy their claims. I actually think in some instances, when you look at some of their claims, it's actually insulting to our intelligence and human dignity. But that's a conversation for another day. And I won't be arrogant enough to say, I have concluded. I am no one. I am somebody who's actually trying, like I said, trying to cure my ignorance. It is my opinion that they are not. By all means, somebody can come along and say, this is how it is compatible. And if the evidence is compelling, I will put my hands up and say, well, actually, yeah, you're right. But then again, you have to ask which religion is compatible with science.
A challenge to everyone out there. Tavian says that religion could be compatible with science.
Or not.
Or not. Who knows? Thank you so much,
You're
Tavian,
welcome.
for
Thank you.
your contribution
Thank
today. I've been Audrey Simmons. This is Association of Black Humanists. See you next time.